equally, I've had the thought that when you're a Christian, it's only going up. But there are hills, there are mountains, there are rivers, there are oceans to cross. And it's not always the easiest journey. But knowing, where you stand, knowing God's place in your life, and knowing what's expected of you as a Christian is always helpful.
That's true, because it tells us when you're in the valley, I'll be there. In the shadows, I'll be there. It is everywhere. So meaning that there'll be a day that you'll be in the valley. There'll be a day that you'll be in the hills. There'll be a day that you won't even be able to get up. So God has to be there for us. As a Christian, He's always being there.
Welcome to Imago Dei, a podcast by women for women, where we discuss what it means to be an image bearer. We seek to apply biblical wisdom to everyday life situations for our growth and glorification of God. Welcome to Imago Dei, a podcast by women for women. Each episode will be hosted by two people, mainly myself, Ms. Chimwemwe Banda, and Mrs. Mirriam Lupunga. We'll be discussing different topics and what it entails to be an image bearer by applying biblical wisdom to everyday complexities of life. We will not be the only people who will be participating in this podcast. We will, from time to time, call on certain members of the church to join us in the various discussions. As I have mentioned, my names are Chimwemwe Banda. I have been a member of Evangel Baptist Church for all my life. I became an official member and a Christian in 2014 in April, and I have been serving God ever since. I am currently working as a legal practitioner at a certain firm, and now I even have this new job, which it's not really a new job, but I am so excited about this new journey doing the podcast, and I hope you are equally excited to join us. Mrs. Lupunga, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Mirriam Lupunga, as Chimwemwe has mentioned. I'm a mother of three. I'm a stay-home mom. I'm a homemaker. Basically, I work at home. I became a Christian when I was at secondary school in grade 9, and since then I've been serving God. My journey has been with a lot of ups and downs, but though with the downs, the ups have been high, and I glorify God for that, because He's always been there, lifting me up and guiding me through my walk as a Christian, a young Christian, a matured Christian. I'm still maturing. I haven't yet reached the matured level, if at all there's ever such a thing. So I glorify God for that.
I think it's interesting that you have mentioned that, your Christianity has come with ups and downs. So often you have this, I've heard people say, and equally I've had the thought that when you're a Christian, it's only going up. But there are hills, there are mountains, there are rivers, there are oceans to cross. And it's not always the easiest journey. But knowing, where you stand, knowing God's place in your life, and knowing what's expected of you as a Christian is always helpful.
That's true, because it tells us when you're in the valley, I'll be there. In the shadows, I'll be there. It is everywhere. So meaning that there'll be a day that you'll be in the valley. There'll be a day that you'll be in the hills. There'll be a day that you won't even be able to get up. So God has to be there for us. As a Christian, He's always being there for me.
That's absolutely true, and thank you for sharing that. So Imago Dei, I love the tone that this particular word comes with, and it is the title of our podcast, Imago Dei. So Imago Dei is the Latin word for image of God, and it's just got that beautiful tone, Imago Dei. Image of God. You see, the Bible gives us an appreciable insight into the image of God in Genesis 1 verse 27. And it reads, "So God created man in His own image. In the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created them." When you just hear the image of God, the first perception is, I have been made just the way God is. When you see me, I am God. And I'm pretty sure when people just hear the words image of God, that's exactly what comes to their mind. Every single person you see, that's God, 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 God. But what are your thoughts? What do you think it means to be made or created in the image of God?
To be created in the image of God, Chimwemwe, means when you look at me as Auntie Mirriam, Mrs. Lupunga, as others would call me. But basically, he looks at what is inside of me, because that is what God created that looks like him. A number of people, when they meet me, they go like, oh, you look like your mom. Others will go like, when they see me, my siblings, they'll all go like, hey, you look alike. There's one time, I'll tell you, there was, I met a man from, he came from Chirundu, and my elder sister used to work there. Now she's in Kapiri.
Okay.
So he goes like, what are you doing here? And I go like, me? What do you mean? I live here. I said, no, you were in Chirundu a few minutes. I said, no, that was not me. That was my sister. And he goes, no, you're the same person. I go like, no, that is my elder sister. I had to call my sister for him to believe that it was not me.
That's interesting.
It was my sister. So when he goes like, are you twins? I said, no, she's older than me. So you see, outwardly, but with God, he looks at the spirit. I am created in God's image. My soul is like God's soul, which does not die. God is eternal. God is everywhere. You cannot confine God. God is a spirit. So my image is in terms of my soul. My soul has got everlasting life. That's why we're told that Christ gives us everlasting life. My soul lives forever. When my body and my soul separate, my soul will not die.
Yeah.
My soul will live on. So that is what being made in the image of God means. To have a soul that does not die. Our spirits, our body definitely die. We see people all the time go to Leopard's Hill. We bury people most of the time. We see them go to the ground. Their bodies go back to the soil, but the soul is not there. So that is my thought on being made in the image of God.
That's very insightful, you know. When I hear the word image, what comes to my mind is a reflection. And when we're told that we are created in the image of God, I think of it as we should be a reflection of who God is, which means the way we talk, the way we react, the way we treat people, the way we go about our lives, whether it's at work, at school, at church, or with our friends, wherever we are with our family, we should be able to reflect who God is. You know, there's certain people who you meet and you can just see God in them. You know what I mean? You can just see, okay, there's something which is different about this person. And I believe that's what it means as well to be created in the image of God.
Exactly.
You should be able to stand out, not for the wrong things.
Yeah.
And not stand out showing off, I'm a Christian, me, I do this. This person cannot match up to me because I know the Bible from Genesis to Revelation without, you know, making any mistake. No. Just this certain behavior, certain, just the way you behave. The way you react, the way you take on life should be a true and real reflection of who God is. You know, I've heard people say that it's a phrase which says something like, you know, you might be the only Bible which someone may read.
Exactly.
So the way you take on each day, the way you treat people, the way you talk to people should be a reflection of God, so that even if they never get a chance to read the Bible, you should at least be that reflection of God to them.
That is true.
I think this would be a very interesting session of podcasts which we will have, you know, looking at different ways in which we can be reflections of who God is, and looking at just what it actually means to be made in the image of God.
That is true, Chimwemwe, because most of the time we tend to think the image of God is the one which is outside. The image of God is what is inside. Because when I get up from here, the way I will behave out there is what is inside. Christ tells us what we eat does not make our bodies, does not make us dirty. It is what comes out from us. So the real me is not what I eat. The real me is what I'll say, how I'll react when somebody says something bad to me, how I'll treat a person who is asking for help or directions, or how I'll interact if somebody steps on my toes. So the image of God is what is inside me, is how I show it outside. Because when you look at when we look at ourselves, we look at what people have, the way they dress, the way they look. the car they drive, the education they've attained, how much money they have. But God looks at my heart.
Yes.
What is my relationship with Him?
Yes, yes.
And how do I relate with God? So my inside should reflect the outside, not the image that I see in the mirror, but the image that God sees in me. Because when I go out there as a Christian, I am telling myself that I am a child of God and I'm reflecting God out there. So you're definitely right. The way we treat people, the way we treat, we try to criticize people. We should ask ourselves, does God criticize me like that? Because we have a very sharp critic when we see somebody dressed. We go like, hey, have you seen how that person dressed? Why? What was she thinking? Like she's not a lawyer, and like she's not this, like she's not that. But really, we should look at how is it that I reflect God when I get up in the morning, when I leave the door, with people at home. What kind of testimony do I have? Who, when God says, let us make man in our image, let us create them, man and woman, in His image. What image are my children seeing, my husband seeing, my maid seeing, before I go to work, before I get on a bus, the person in a shop that is going to attend to me, what image do they see?
Exactly.
Because the image is important. Because if God said, let us create them in our image, it was important. He wanted us to look like Him, to behave like Him. Yeah.
You know, in your explanation, it's just made me think of something, which is, it is important for us to be able to show that reflection. What I mean is that we should not be Christians at home.
No.
Christians only with your close family and friends. Like you mentioned, when you go to a shop, you know, people should still be able to see the reflection of Christ even when you're at the shop. Exactly. Wherever you go, whatever you're attending to, people should be able to see the reflection of, that you are reflecting God in your life.
And you know, at times we tend to say not to be a Christian at home. You'll find that we are actually just a Christian at church. At home, people go like, when you tell your children, oh, I'm going to church, your neighbor's going, even that one goes to church. I wonder what you know, Christianity is not something that we wear. The image of God, me being made in the image of God, is not something that I wear, I put on and take off.
Yes, yes.
Each one of us, even the one who steals, who kills, all of us, as long as you're a human being, we are made in the image of God. And most of the time we tend to misrepresent God in the way we behave. We sin against God. We tend to tarnish the name of God because when people look at me and look at the testimony that I'm saying, that I'm a Christian, they'll go like, really? If that's who the Father is, I wouldn't want to be part of that household.
Exactly.
Because even with parents at home, when our children leave our home, when they go to school, we tend to tell them, respect your teachers, do this, do that. When you're called as a parent at school, go like, your child has misbehaved. The first thought you have is they're not representing themselves. It is where they're coming from.
Exactly.
Because people say that an apple does not fall far from the tree. So if I am a child of God, I should just fall right next to God.
Exactly.
And meaning that everything that I do out there should represent Him. I should have, people should look at me and say, indeed, God does exist because I've seen Him in that woman going there. Yeah.
I like something which you said where you mentioned, I think you gave different categories of people, and one of them was even thieves are made in the image of God. You know, we tend to want to segregate certain people because of their certain characteristics or certain traits which they have, and you might feel like a thief cannot be made in the image of God, and yet the Bible tells us that God created man, not only specific people of a certain tribe, of a certain race, were all created in the image of God. And we ought not to judge other people, maybe because of the certain traits or characteristics which they may have. They were equally made in the image of God.
And that is true. There's no person who is, I'm not Bemba, I'm not Lamba, I'm not Tonga, I'm not Nsenga with God. With God, He only sees one thing.
Yes.
His image.
Yes.
He only sees one thing. There's no color with God. There's no black, blue, green. Yes, He created us. We see all those beautiful colors around. But with God, when He looks at us as, this is my child. I can attest, Chimwemwe, in your family, you are all in different shapes. There's tall, short. When Mrs. Banda looks at you, he doesn't just say, oh, Chimwemwe is my last born, she is my child. No, he looks at everybody. She looks at everybody and goes like, these are my children.
Yes.
She doesn't choose. When I look at my children, I don't go like, oh, this one is better than that one. No, when I look at my children, I go like, these are my children. And when I'm treating them, I want to give them the same things. God gives us what we are told, common grace. He gives us rain. He gives us sunshine. He doesn't choose. But it is us who are made in His image. When we learn from our God, when we go out there, what is it that we do? Because when we look at the image that God has created, no one can say that I do not know God. Because God has made Himself known in the things that He has created. When you go out there, you look at the trees, you look at the ants, you look at the hills, you look at the sky. Everything represents God. You can actually see God in all things. So no one can say, no, me, I come from far east. I don't know who God is. God has given us Himself, which is His image, which is our soul, that is able to communicate that there is a God somewhere who made these things. So no matter where we come from, no matter who we are all made in the image of God. We represent God.
I absolutely agree with everything that you said. And I think these podcasts are going to be so insightful, not only for the listeners who we want it to be insightful for, but even for ourselves. And I noticed something which is very interesting, that this podcast is by the women of Evangel Baptist for women. Can you just give me some insight on this particular issue?
That's very interesting. For women, by women, exactly. Well, when you look at the world that we live in, Chimwemwe, there's so many things that tend to mislead us as women. We're trying to make ourselves like we're separate from what God has made us to be. We want to change ourselves in a certain way, which is when we say that God created us in His image, there's a purpose that there's a reason why God made us. And God made everything for a purpose. Even the small ant, when you see it, you might think, but when you look at it, you look at the work that it is doing, you go like, wow. God is really God. When you look at the snake, it also has its own job, even though we run away from it and kill it itself. But there's a purpose. So God created us for a purpose. And when you look at the world today, we tend to mislead each other as women. We tend to want to incline to certain things, to move away from the image that God created us and for the purpose that God created us. So this podcast by women for women is trying to encourage the women that there's a purpose that God created you. There's a reason why God made me to be born from the Zulus, to be married to Mr. Lupunga, to be part of Evangel Baptist Church as a woman. And in the position that God has placed me, I need to seek to glorify Him so that I don't move myself away from His image. I don't move myself away from the main reason, because if I start telling myself, no, I want equal rights, which I'm not saying they're not good, but there are times that we need to weigh and ask ourselves, what does the scripture say? Why did God create Eve to be the helper of Adam? And what is the purpose for Eve? What was she there for? Yes, people will say, no, she misled Adam and things like that. But Eve also served a purpose. She was a helper. In my helpment, instead of me seeking to be equal with my husband, I need to find a way to glorify God in where He has placed me. With God, He doesn't look at me when time comes to be judged. He won't say, because you are a woman. No, I'm a sinner in God's eyes. Same as a man is a sinner. He won't look at man sins more, woman sins less. No, we are both sinners. Because when you look at Genesis, where we are looking at the image of God, you see that both Adam and Eve were equally punished for the sin that they committed. So let us seek God. The purpose for women, by women, is to encourage one another, to build each other up, to seek to glorify God in the image that God has made us, in the position that God has placed us to be.
I'm even more excited after hearing why it's specifically for women.
Exactly.
Are you able to share with us maybe some of the topics which we will be covering?
Indeed, we have quite a number of topics. We'll be looking at the culture dividing between older women and younger women. Actually, these days you see it more. You find that when you move around, you hear people, no, the younger generation these days, they just don't understand this. I don't know why this generation behaves as when we were growing up.
Yes.
So we want to understand what is it that divides older women from younger women. The importance of mentorship and being a mentor. If I'm an older woman, why am I not mentoring Chimwemwe instead of me pointing a finger at her and say, Chimwemwe is like this? Why these younger people don't understand choices and influences that we make, and being made in the image of God in terms of family, career, productivity, creating friendship, cultivating friendship, and things like that. Those are some of the topics that we'll be looking at.
That's very interesting. I hope we'll also be looking at things like self-discovery and finding purpose, which I think, especially for us young people, it's something which is very cardinal, and to be able to impart that on the young people, especially from someone like you who has seen life from a different perspective, I know you'll be able to teach and advise in that particular area. And I hope you'll be looking at things as well like discipline and self-control and biblical womanhood defined.
Yeah, definitely those topics will be part of our discussion throughout this podcast, and it will be quite an interesting thing. This is a podcast not only for young people, but for older people, and we are seeking to bring in everybody so that when we have these discussions, nobody's left behind, because we are saying it is for women, by women. So if you know that you're out there, you're a woman, you're more especially women from Evangel, we'll be seeking to incorporate them, for them to give us their wisdom, how they've navigated through life in their Christian walk with the Lord, in other aspects, career and things like that, being a mom, being married, being single. So we're hoping that this podcast will really bring everyone together, and that we'll learn to glorify God in a manner that God created. So we're hoping that you'll listen to our episode next week, with a topic that we'll be looking at, the culture dividing between older women and younger women. We'll seek to bring a number of people to join us. Thank you very much for listening to us today. And please subscribe to our channel and be updated with the rest of the topics. Thank you very much.